This is a bit of a rerun, so if you have heard before, I'm sorry. Hopefully it's worth hearing again. So this is called The Papers. I had my first real job. I'd finally worn my mom down after bugging her all summer long. I wanted a paper route. She wanted me to weed the lawn if I wanted hot money. We could not come to an accord. My friend Jeremy was away, and I convinced her to let me just try it, so I covered his route while his family went to the shore. And when a new route came up a few weeks later, I begged and begged and begged, and she caved. Enough already. You can do the papers. But I tell you what, mister, when you get bored, it won't be me delivering those things every day. I had started with about 20 papers. The first one at the Coughlins, down the corner. They had a grand big house with pillars up the front. I think he was a dentist. For the first week or so, they didn't have a bag ready for me. The last kid must have kept it, so I had to drag my papers around to one of my mother's old shoulder bags, turned inside out so you couldn't see the flowers, but I still looked like a bit of a schmo. When I got the new canvas bag with the orange reflective strap, I could walk proudly down the street, the strap glistening in the sunlight on my way out and in the headlights of cars if I got caught up skipping stones in the park on the way back. It was pretty easy work. The only real problem was Max, the Beasley's big Doberman Pinscher. I didn't like dogs, and they didn't like me. Really, it was just that I was scared of them, and they kind of knew it, just like a bully in school, and they always went for me, and I kept getting bit. It was even getting in my dreams. I don't know what it was. I'd had this nightmare that the Muppets had all turned mean, and they were breaking into our house. Eventually, they'd force our front door open, and Rolf would steam in, and he'd bite me. I think I know part of why, because our front door made a terrible noise when it opened. And it was probably George, my stepfather, returning late. And I think my dream would kind of reach out and absorb that noise and weave it in. I'd lie there in a pool of sweat, which got me doubly worried, because when I went to the library and looked in the big medical encyclopedia, it said that sweating was a symptom of rabies. But it also said you needed to get a shot to get rid of it, and everybody at school said it was a huge needle. So I was keeping my rabies concerns to myself. The first time I went there, I opened the gate, and all I saw was teeth and slurping jowls, and I turned to run, but Mr. Beasley called out from the porch, and Max stopped short. She was quickly there, grabbing him by the collar. He was still growling under his breath, hungry for a taste of me. "I'm so sorry, he's not usually like this." It was the same for the first few days, until she said she'd make sure he was out the back in the afternoons. As I arrived, I'd call out, and I could hear Max out the back, snarling and whining and hungry for me. Then I'd throw a rock or something into the yard, I was sure he'd come turning around the corner for me. Only when he didn't did I open the gate and quickly run up and drop the paper on the veranda. The only other drama was collection day. I dreaded it because the route took twice as long, because instead of just flinging the paper, I had to knock and wait for the person to root around for change, call out into the house for purses and wallets. I had a little chit book, and they'd hand over $1, and I'd give them 4 little squares of paper, which represented 4 weeks in advance. But most people never had the $1 and placated me with whatever shrapnel they could come up with. The man from the Herald called and asked if I'd be interested in delivering 10 more papers on my route, and I said sure, and then he explained how great it was, because they were all at the same address. He just went into the convalescent home at the bottom of the hill, go to the gift shop, and they'd explain everything. The shop wasn't much of a shop. Some old lollies, some tissues. The volunteer woman in the shop, Mrs. Reardon, who was probably at least as old as anyone else in there, and explained that she couldn't get around very well anymore, and she had rung the Herald about getting some help distributing the papers to the patients. So she had a little list of room numbers and names about who got the papers each day, and I just had to drop them in. But it smelled like wee and medicine in there. Most of the people were stacked in the common room, zombied out and drooling as they looked at the TV. I found the old people a bit spooky. It was hard to talk to them. They were either really angry and muttering, or they were so happy to see you they'd pull at you and not want to let you go. I came to realize that my visit was the only thing that happened there on most days. On one of the first days when I got to old Dave's room, it was really Dave who got me started on the real money, you see. He pulled me aside one day, said he'd make it worth my while if I could get a pack of Chesterfields into him. He explained the nurses would let the patients have 5 cigarettes a day. Jack was more a pack-a-day sort, so I'd smuggle him in with his paper, and then he could smoke all he wanted. He'd slip me $5 and a note asking for 2 packs of Chesterfields and some matches. I'd give the note to the man at the shop. He'd slip his glasses down his nose, stare over them at me, every time. I had a trustworthy face, I guess. He'd look left and he'd look right, and then he'd turn the cigarettes over. Dave let the other patients know I could get them things, and before long I was making more at the old folks' home than I was on the rest of the route. It was simple things, a comb, a banana, some lip gloss for Mrs. Blake. She had a bit of a thing with Mr. Jacobson, see? The other old ladies would tease her about wearing out her lips. She'd get very angry and insist there was nothing wrong with her and Walter. There was something in the way she said that made me think of what he must have looked like when he was younger, enjoying each other's company. One day I got to Dave's bed. It was all made up. His little pictures and the knit blanket and his chessboard were gone. I asked his roommate, and he said he died. The emphysema got him. I nodded like I knew what that meant and left. I looked that word up in the dictionary too the next day and felt like a fool for killing my best customer. Eventually they moved Jesse into the bed vacated by Dave. He had a tube in his throat and couldn't talk, apparently. I came to know they had removed his larynx and half his esophagus because it was riddled with cancer. He could see into his mouth and stuff. He'd grab at me, desperate to talk. His jaw would make searching, yawn-like movements, but he couldn't twist out a word. It scared me, his eagerness that he had to get out whatever it was, and he couldn't. I really hated seeing him. It was a relief when he wasn't there. I'd just leave the paper and hurry past his room. One day I could hear a commotion behind me as I got to the end of the hall. I could see Jesse down there, his eyes searching for me, waving to me, and my face flushed as I backed my way out of the heavy swinging door and ran away, as fast as I could, my lungs burning. The next day I just dumped my papers in the stream. I couldn't face Jesse again. I kicked around in the woods near my house and arrived home breathless. My mother was waiting in the kitchen for me. Mrs. Beasley rang, asking about her paper. I started to say something about her dog and how vicious it was, and then I just started bawling. My mother calmed me down. I explained about Jesse and how half his face was gone and how horrible it was. She soothed me for a bit and talked me around it, asked me how I thought Jesse must feel. I could see her shiver. She looked at her cigarette and put it out. When I went to the next day and came to Jesse's room, one of the nurses was there. I put the paper on his little side table and was moving from foot to foot and looking at him. The nurse looked at me and asked, "Do you know how to play hangman?" She grabbed a pen and paper and pushed it at me. Jesse really loves hangman. And so I began to understand. I would have simple words, but Jesse would make up stupid guesses. And it was his turn. I guessed wrong. He'd find ways to keep the guys alive, drawing little belts and a scarf and other bits to keep the game going. When I started to make movements like I had to leave, Jesse grabbed the paper and just like Dave produced a note and some money, asking for Marlboros. He finished it off with, "Like Dave," and a smiley face. As far as what I could tell, his face was smiling too. I brought the note to the man at the shop the next day, and he sighed. Change is as good as a holiday, I guess. It went on this way for a while. I'd bring my papers, Jesse his cigarettes, and play a little hangman. I would get bigger and bigger words out of the dictionary at the library to use. He would also write little notes, and a couple times when I got there, he had written out a little story about being in the war or flying a plane and being brave. But then he seemed to be getting tired. Sometimes he was even asleep when I'd get there, and I'd just leave the paper. One day I was rushing through my route, and I went to the Beasley's gate without checking, and Max was right there. He came straight at me, and I just froze with my heart pounding, and he snapped at my hand and bit me deep. I cried out, and Mrs. Beasley came running and apologizing and smacked Max and then fixed me up. I rushed off to finish my route, and when I got to Jesse, he pointed at my hand. I explained everything about the dogs and my dreams and stuff. He started to scrawl on the pad about how you have to let the dog know that you're the boss and get kind of angry at it inside. Not scared because you can smell your fear and adrenaline got confused. The next day I saw a dog on the road and went right up to it, angry-like, and it didn't do anything. I swallowed hard when I got to the Beasleys and went right in the gate and around the side of the house. Max was chained up there and his ears pricked up as I came around the corner. He looked at me quizzically as I approached him, and it was the same. When I got to the home later that day, I was excited to tell Jesse that he was right and thank him. But his bed was all made up. The hangman papers were gone. I hurried along and smoked my first cigarette on the way home. So I guess we'll